Hello and welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernoff, and this episode is brought to you by 12th Street Sound, a production, recording, and mixing studio in New Westminster, BC. Anthony Senarini at 12th Street Sound has a special offer for you, the listener. If you're an artist on a budget, somebody who needs some space to craft their story as an artist, you're looking to cook up some new music here in the second half of 2022, you can get up to 20% off your next recording project with Anthony at 12th Street Sound. Now, he has a package designed specifically for the kind of artists on a budget that want to get a project done at a reasonable rate that still stands up to the best of the best. But whatever your project might be, you can talk to Anthony about it, and he will be happy to give you access to a special rate. So to take advantage of this offer for listeners of this show specifically, go to 12thstreet.ca/RCP to learn more about how you can save up to 20% off your next recording project. That's 12thstreet.ca, 12thst.ca/RCP. This episode is sponsored by Railtown Mastering. I'm going to tell you something that I don't think I've actually said anywhere publicly until now, which is that I'm working on my second album as William Chernoff. Now, when I completed my first album, after I got the mixes done, I had to get it mastered. And if you don't know, mastering is when you finish the recordings that you've already mixed and you prepare them for release in whatever format you're doing. So that's digital or CD or vinyl, etc. And who mastered my first album? Well, you guessed it. It was Andrew at Railtown. So I'm super proud to have him sponsoring the show because I think he did a fantastic job. And that's why I'm going to hire him to do it again for my second album here. I'm actually just about to email him. And if you need to get your music mastered this year, I recommend you do exactly what I'm doing. So you can go to railtownmastering.com to learn more about Andrew, who he's worked with, and his rates for the different services he provides. And to send him your music, email him directly at andrew@railtownmastering.com. That's andrew@railtownmastering.com to get your music mastered this year. Okay, so usually you hear the guest's voice here. On today's remarkable episode, you'll soon see that this one's pretty cool. Your boy's been doing podcasts for a little bit, and I ran out of hard drive space while this one was rolling. So the guest and I talked for probably over 2 hours. And if you wanted 2 hours of conversation, I apologize that I'm not getting that for you today. I'm not able to render the whole thing, but here is the conversation that we had up to the point where my hard drive got full of podcast goodness. I am migrating to an external drive now so this doesn't happen again. Thanks for bearing with me on this podcast learning journey. Let's get into the episode. Happy Wednesday, and coming at you from New Westminster, BC, this is the Rhythm Changes podcast, the only weekly interview podcast about jazz and creative music in Canada. Wow, this week's episode is quite special. I haven't done like this in quite some time. It's very long, if you haven't already noticed by the runtime. This is a good friend of mine, a great guitarist in the Vancouver jazz scene, and we talk about quite a lot of stuff here, so get ready. You're in for a ride. Our guest today is a guitarist, producer, lessons teacher, writer. He's written for Rhythm Changes in addition to everything else he does in the Vancouver jazz scene, and somebody I've looked up to be honest, among the group of my peers here, because I've always thought that you don't want to learn necessarily all the time one-on-one directly from like an absolute master, because a lot of the stuff is going to fly over your head. You want to learn, I always thought, at least in my opinion, from somebody who's 2 steps ahead of you, but on the same journey. And this is somebody who's been 2 steps ahead of me for about 10 years now. So please welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast, Chris Fraser.
Thank you. Wasn't expecting that. Wow, that's very flattering.
Well, thanks for coming to New West. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm doing really well. Yeah. Better every day, as they say.
Do you feel like Jazz Fest, it's a thing of a past now? You're living in the here and now here at the end of July.
A little bit. I mean, I don't know. This year at Jazz Fest was different. Like this year at Jazz Fest, I feel like I'm feeling a bit more of like the residual buzz from Jazz Fest compared to previous years. Like obviously Jazz Fest ends and like there's no more, touring musicians in town or anything like that. But I do feel like I don't know. I put together a gig like the Friday after Jazz Fest, and like people came out.
All right.
And it felt like a big old show. People were listening, and it was I mean, I feel like there is a listening culture in Vancouver that feels new.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah, like Jazz Fest, it really got people. I think it really got people excited about live music.
Yeah. So in past years, I would have felt this way too. Do you feel like it's almost like a summer vacation kind of situation where it feels like everybody's gone for a couple of weeks after?
Yes, yeah, totally. I mean, I think that does happen. I think people do just kind of like, because a lot of people, I mean, like that's the busiest part of their year. So
Yeah.
like as soon as that's finished, they get out of here. They go on vacation or whatever. But I mean, also it does sort of feel that way because a lot of my closest friends who don't live in town come to Jazz Fest and then go back to where they're from, right? Like
Literally, yeah.
David Blake, one of my closest friends, lives in New York now, comes here for Jazz Fest and then leaves. Amelia and Eli, we got to play a show, played at Tyrant Studios.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy I got to play with them. But yeah, they're back. They're back in Montreal, and now I'm here in Westminster with you.
So you are feeling that, literally that thing where, when you
Yeah.
talk about the international stars, it's like, yeah, they
Yes.
come in here and then they come out. But you've had these friendships for long enough now that you
Yeah.
are really close friends with really established Canadian jazz artists who are
Yeah.
in their late 20s, in their 30s,
Yeah.
and they're doing that. They're coming here and they're playing great gigs and then they got to go home, right?
That's right. Yeah, I guess that's just what it's turning into
It's the
now.
same
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess yeah. The answer is both,
Yeah.
either and.
So that Tyrant gig, you've been playing a lot. You play a lot at the Poorhouse, you play at the Tangent, you've played at the Jazz Fest in different ensembles. When was this particular Tyrant thing with Amelia and Eli?
Tyrant was 2 Fridays ago. It was here. Let me.
So end of the festival kind of situation.
It was right after the festival ended. It was that same week that the festival ended.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
the festival always ends on the Sunday, so it was the Friday after the.
Oh,
Sunday.
after. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then Amelia and Eli were doing the Frankie's Late Show on the last actual weekend of the festival. They
That's
did the
right.
After Dark set.
Yes.
And then before that, I got to MC for them and listen to them at the Water Street, David Blake, Eli Davidovich, Amelia
The
Hahn.
one where the
power went out.
Yeah. That's right. And it just ended after that, right? Like
Well, we had hope for maybe 15 minutes. People didn't know what was going on. And then somebody at the restaurant, this is what I heard at least. I don't know if how it actually went down, but then they heard from BC Hydro that they weren't going to be able to restore power to their building or their block or whatever until overnight. So, they had to close the restaurant at that point and settle up everything. That must have been quite an adventure. But then at that point, we knew that the guys were going home.
Was it because of another historic heritage building being burned down in the downtown east side?
Fortunately, not that we could perceive. So yeah, but that was funny one. It was a burning set of music though, ironically. So
I'm sure, man. Yeah.
But then you played with them too, and you're good friends with all three of them.
Yeah.
David, Millie, and Eli. So what did you play when you played at Tyrant? What did you play?
We did a good mix of stuff, just like stuff that we all like to play. I think what we had in mind was that Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mark Turner, Jeff Ballard, Larry Grenadier quartet. That's like kind of the idea that we had. But I mean, I brought a couple of my own tunes. I also brought an arrangement of a Phoebe Bridgers tune.
Oh yeah,
Savior Complex.
Okay.
Dan Dirksen, he contacted me only like not even 2 weeks before then for the gig, because I had been bugging him to get a gig at Tyrant for a while, and he messages me and he's like, "Hey, somebody dropped out. I need someone to play on this Friday night. Can you do it?" And I said yes. And then I asked everyone if they could do it, and they said yes, thankfully. And that was actually the night before the three of them were actually flying out to Montreal. Even John Nicholson, who was playing, he also flew out to Montreal just to visit his brother who lives there for a couple of days, but also Amelia and Eli were leaving the next day. So like it was very, like we just barely got them before they were all leaving to be able to do this really, really fun show. But I was super pleased with it. Yeah, we filled up the room. I know you've been to Tyrant, right?
Yeah, I played there once as a leader way back in January 2020, I guess, and I played there with
pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I had a weird band, a funky band, a mishmash of things because I was kind of between projects.
Uh-huh.
My band was Gabrielle Duvroy, my best friend
Yeah.
Gabe on violin, and Alvin on guitar,
Okay.
and Carson on drums, who has always played drums with me.
Carson. Dude, I love Carson.
And then I had Thad on trumpet for the first set.
Nice.
So it was kind of like a set
What,
one,
did
set
you have to
two
leave?
split situation. Yeah, you had to leave.
That wouldn't surprise me, man.
Yeah. And then somebody else had to leave too. I can't remember, but it was like it was like a split set situation. So that was actually the first time there was the first time I played at Tyrant, but it wasn't the first time I met Dan. I met Dan because Dan was great friends and musical partners with this guy named Bill Moisey. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he passed away of cancer last year. And he was a long time, like he was probably in his 50s or something. He was like a long time sound tech and like a technician, but also a musician and composer who wrote like really kind of Frank Zappa avant-garde kind of, and like would put together epic ensembles to deliver this music. And so he did that at the Seashell Arts Festival. And so, and him and Dan kind of co-arranged and maybe co-wrote a lot of this music together.
Nice.
And so they roped in a bunch of
so
random
it's like
players.
a tribute to his friend.
Yeah.
Like this Zappa kind of music that he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention Bill Moisey on an episode of the show at some point because we miss Bill and he was a great dude. But yeah, the Seashell Arts Festival in 2019, that was when I met Dan because he brought me in. He brought Gabe in as well to play violin.
Cool.
Like James Meager was up there. Who else was up? There were like 12 of us who went up to Seashell that weekend. And then after that, then I played at Tyrant a couple months later because then I found out he was doing that and I was like, oh, sweet. And then I played there with Amber Sang a couple months ago.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Also with Alvin?
That was Amber, Alvin, Clem Pytel on drums, Dean on piano, and me on bass. So
great.
Those good times.
Clem's a great drummer too.
That was the first time I met him to play with him for that gig. Yeah.
Yeah. He subbed a couple times for Todd in this bigger band that I did the last year.
What was that? I don't know if I remember.
You don't know about bigger band? It was the VCC ensemble.
Oh yeah, Dean was doing this too.
Dean
right?
was in it. It was me. It was a great band, honestly.
Oh, so you played on Dean's things in that band? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That checks out. Yeah. Gotcha.
So it was just this last from about late September up until April. We basically just did this VCC course.
Okay, yeah, no, I know what that is. I thought it was like the Chris Fraser bigger band or something. I was like, no, I never heard about this.
No. It was the VCC bigger band. It was John Corsford's course that he teaches. Even though, like, I think at most one band member was an actual VCC student.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
everybody else registered for the course, but not for any other part of the program. Yeah. So, but it was a great group, and that's also how I got to know Jocelyn Waugh a little bit better.
Nice.
She was in the group, and then she asked me to play Jazz Fest on the Sunday, on the last day of Jazz Fest, and that was with Winston Winkler and Omar Amlani. That was an awesome show. That was a really good show.
Where was that?
That was at the Roundhouse.
Okay, yeah. Was that around when I know Thad played at the Roundhouse.
Thad played the day before.
Okay.
And we were the last band at that venue.
Closing it out.
I always play the last day of Jazz Fest for some reason.
You're the closer. You're the finisher, Mr. Reliable.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I'm coming in at
it's like Jeff Parker closed the actual festival down at Ironworks. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's me. It's totally me. Yeah. No, I mean, I guess that's just how it goes. But it was a great show. The crowd loved it. It was Jocelyn's first time leading a group.
Really?
I think maybe ever.
Such a strong side player, I thought.
I know, yeah. Like I think that's the thing. Like she's just kind of been, jobbing and like building her chops, and she's become like such a strong player. And she sung a tune. She sung Robert Glasper version of Afro Blue.
Oh yeah.
We played. It was an interesting combination of tunes we ended up doing, which is totally typical of someone who's just trying to like figure out like what they want to do like as a band leader. It was fun to do, and I think that like with Winston and Omar being such like vets at this point, like they could just kind of like make any combination of tunes just sound cohesive and consistent, right? Like maybe I had self-conscious thought where I was thinking like, is this all gonna like fit together? Like we're doing like this Robert Glasper thing, and then we're also doing, a Wayne Shorter tune, and then we're also doing we're doing a regular standard and like all this kind of stuff. But it all fit together really, really well. Like I said, like the crowd loved it. We got a standing ovation for both sets.
Okay.
I've never
From
seen
the
a
same crowd, pretty much. The same
basically
people
the same
hanging out.
crowd. Yeah. I've never seen a standing ovation for the first set of a 2-set show.
Yeah,
But
that's a bit odd. That's almost like clapping between movements at a classical concert.
exactly. Yeah. It was like, you know what? I'll take it. It was a huge morale booster for sure. Not that it needed to be boosted, but it was like,
Oh, you always need something. It's a
Yeah.
two-way street. You always need a little morale boost. There's no
and
shame in
also
that.
like, especially like there's always a bit of like pressure when you're playing Jazz Fest where it's like you need to be
legit.
validated like when you're there, right? Like
Oh yeah, you need to be validated. Okay, I see what
right,
you
or
mean, yeah.
yeah, I need to feel validated when I play.
Well, I've
Jazz
never
Fest.
played there, so I don't know.
Right,
But I thought you were
right.
gonna say like, oh, you feel like you need to be legit in how you present yourself. But no, you're
Yeah.
talking about the other direction. Like you need to feel like you belong there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's always like maybe at a certain point, like you grow out of that. Like I was talking to Brad Turner at the show, and he told me that he's played it like literally every Vancouver International Jazz Festival that there's been.
Yeah, believe it.
And I'm like, okay, so like maybe he probably feels valid there.
Maybe you're starting to get there at that point.
Maybe
Yeah.
I've been playing the Jazz Fest for a couple of years now, which is always great.
Mhm.
I didn't have my own group this year, although I did do a thing right before Jazz Fest as part of Coastal Jazz, which was fun.
You've had a couple of weeks where you've really been stringing them together. Like you
Yeah.
know, because we do the list, right? I see
That's right.
see you sometimes 2 or 3 times on a week, and these are
Yeah.
at like some of the core venues.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like I see you playing 2 or 3 times in a week, and it's not just at random restaurants that only occasionally and peripherally have jazz.
Right.
It's at like the real venues, you know.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to be able to play. I'm trying to give myself more time recently, right? Like I have always had like a job on the side, almost always since I graduated from CAP.
Which was in what year? Just to clear
I
the
graduated in
lines.
2014.
2014. Okay, nice. Yeah.
So, and I mean, I've always had like some kind of like peripheral like job, and even right now I have like a day job. Although I'm cutting down my hours there to just 3 days a week so that I have more time to be a musician, because I've come to the realization that like it's important to actually make a real dedication to being an artist with your time.
A practice, not just
Yeah.
to practice, but to have a practice.
Well, yeah, like because like I think, well, like when I first graduated from CAP, I was only like 21,
Yeah.
22 years old.
Yeah.
Because I started right out of high school, right? So like when I started at CAP, I was 17.
Same. Yeah.
And and then I did 5 years. So yeah, I was 22 when I finished, and I was like, oh well, I need to pay rent. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I went through a period of time where in a 2-month stretch before landing a full-time job, I had 5 different jobs that I went through,
Right.
mostly in food service.
Wow.
And that sucked.
Totally.
But it was just like that. Like I only knew about, the world outside of school as being like, you have a job. So I needed to pay rent, and I got a job at like Shaw Cable, and I did that for like 3 years.
I remember when you did that.
I worked
yeah.
at Shaw Cable.
We've known
for-
each other we haven't always been seeing each other often.
Yeah.
But we've known each other for probably about 10-ish years.
Yeah, like on and off.
I remember
for sure.
when you were working for Shaw. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I worked at
Yeah.
Shaw, and like, I was making enough money to pay rent, but also like, I've always kind of like, up until recently, I'd say, I've always kind of like discounted my, I guess like my value in the scene and that kind of thing, where it's just like, oh well, I'm nobody. Like I'm just in the background.
It's the same
like,
feeling as
everybody
when you're
else is
looking
there,
for the
like,
validation when you have to play
totally,
at the Jazz
yeah,
Fest,
yeah.
right?
And so like I was just kind of like worrying about myself and not really like reaching out to the community or anything like that. And like when I was at Shaw, I was able to fund my album that I recorded in 2016.
Which is called Give.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Give.
And it's still on Bandcamp.
It's still on Bandcamp. It's with me and Mealy and Eli. I'm proud of that recording. I think that session was awesome. We did it in one day, and I funded it completely just because I had this day job. But I mean, I realize now that you can, you can get funding, right? Like you can, if you're an artist, there's people who want to give you money to make art.
You're talking about grants.
Yeah.
Or
crowdfunding, subsidized housing. There's a lot of options, and there are people who are trying to find the artists, find the people who are motivated to do that kind of thing. I actually did this thing that Music BC does recently, a couple months ago, called Jumpstart.
Oh yeah, is that like it's
a career coaching
counseling,
thing?
Career coaching, yeah. So who were you with?
Her name is Christina Lau.
Yeah. Who also has a podcast called
That's right.
Bombshell Brunches.
And we talked for 90 minutes. I told her about my situation and what my experience is, what my goals are and everything. And she was like, you need to quit your job. You need to quit your day job.
So when was this?
This was a couple months ago.
Oh, wow.
In May. And I was like, oh, no one's ever told me that. Right? No, it's funny because I guess I never saw music as a money earning venture or anything like that. And I still don't, but I also didn't realize that meant that it was, mutually exclusive from making a living.
Right. And also we have friends I don't know, just past podcast guests alone, like Alvin and Johnny Tobin. We have friends who play anything and everything.
Yeah.
And their thing is that they can excel in any situation. And then, you can imagine how that can be a career and how that can provide you with days of work every week,
totally.
Kind of thing. But I didn't always do that, and you didn't always do that either.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads you to think when we're here playing jazz on our own terms and in this scene, then you don't think of it as you're out there working every night.
Yeah. I think I've only recently started thinking about how to define my artistic vision, and it's occurred to me that I actually have a very strong sense of my vision as an artist.
I would second that. I can imagine what you sound like. I've heard you dozens of times,
sure.
Right? So, and you do have a strong sound. You have an identifiable voice, right?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You do.
And it's something I've developed, with just the experience that I've
over 10 or 15 years,
right? Because I tell people I worked at Shaw for 3 years after I graduated, and that's all I did. But what I don't tell people is that I worked at Shaw, but I was also I recorded an album while I was there. I also was playing at the Libra Room once a week for a while,
right?
While I was working at Shaw. So I would finish an 8-hour shift at work, go home, grab my stuff, go play at the Libra Room until 12 a.m. And that was experience that completely formed my voice and informed my ability to, I mean, the Libra Room, say what you will about the Libra Room, right? But I think that it was the perfect kind of situation to train somebody like myself on how to become an effective leader.
Okay.
An effective band leader.
So we have a lot of listeners to this podcast who are too young and they never saw the Libra Room. So you might be a good person to kind of paint a picture of what this venue was like. I mean, I spent a lot of time
I feel
there.
like the Libra Room was a good example of a venue, a type of venue that you don't really see anymore. Maybe for the better, but I mean, what the Libra Room was that since it's been gone has not been repeated is a venue that had music every single night. Sometimes 2 or 3 acts of music every night.
And this is, we're talking the second floor Gastown, is kind of doing that, but not quite, not quite
totally.
on that level.
Yeah. Second floor is doing awesome. I just did their first Tuesday. They just started a Tuesday. I just did that.
Who'd you do that with?
Great. That was with Todd Stewart and Jeff Gammon.
Oh,
it was great.
What a trio, man. Wow, on a Tuesday night, you can hear just
on
3 killer players.
That was funny. That was a good one. I mean, I think that's where the post Jazz Fest lethargy started to kick in because
was when you were playing that gig.
Well, not for me. I think for the concert goers because
Oh, you saw the audience kind of dip a
attended.
little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, that's when you saw that in literally the first couple days after the last festival weekend. You did have of course you would have a dip in the
Yeah, of
audience
course.
there to some
Yeah,
extent
yeah,
as people are getting back to their day jobs and getting back to
Exactly.
their,
Yeah.
yeah. But what a band. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
So Second Floor Gastown, they're the closest thing to that, maybe we could say, in terms of they're trying to put music on pretty much every night. But the Libra Room was doing it in maybe a little bit of a looser way, and they had more musicians coming through.
Okay,
and,
there is a specific difference. Second Floor Gastown is
restaurant.
It's a restaurant, but also second floor. The upstairs is much more of a listening room, right? Everyone
The Libra Room is kind of rowdy.
The Libra Room was a bar.
Yeah.
Right? And you were kind of competing with the room
for sonic space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do recall this.
And it was you were competing with the people, the patrons of the Libra Room, and sometimes you were competing with the management of the Libra Room for whatever, right? But yeah, so for people who aren't aware, it was a bar and restaurant on Commercial Drive.
Commercial and Gravely, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Just off Commercial and First. It was it was the music there was curated by Bruno Hubert, who for a while lived upstairs from the Libra Room, but eventually he moved out and instead moved across the street from the Libra
and continued to play there very often,
most nights. Yeah.
And you're talking like 2 or 3 bands, so he would be first, and then there would be a band.
That's right. Yeah. So usually I would play right after Bruno finished his solo set.
And you had a regular thing arranged with him where he was bringing you in there every week, right? Kind of thing.
More or less. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't as agreed.
Yeah.
It would more like be, Facebook message, hello, monsieur, can you please bring trio tonight, tomorrow night, something like that. Not a lot of notice, but I had given myself,
So it wasn't always the same night of the week?
No. I mean, like,
it wasn't like you were there every Thursday night or anything.
No, I played a lot of Wednesdays. I played a lot of, early week kind of stuff.
Yeah, the spots that needed to be filled if they were going to do
music
exactly.
Every night. And I was a young guy, and I was just looking for work. And and the Libra Room would pay $50 a person.
Right. For mostly trios.
So I would get, whoever was available. I remember the first day I played at the Libra Room, it was in my last year at CAP in 2014. I had sent Bruno a very professional Facebook Messenger message asking for a gig, maybe 2 weeks before then, right? That he had maybe seen or not seen. I don't know. I just sent it, put it out into the ether, and I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, he didn't reply. I'm like, okay, well, maybe he just doesn't want me to play. And I had a rehearsal with Nightcap. I was in the rhythm section of Nightcap my last year with Jeff Gammon.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Wright was drumming in that group.
Oh, yeah.
And we did our rehearsal. The rehearsal ended at 4:30 or 5 p.m. or something like that. And we get out of rehearsal. I look at my phone, see I have a new message. Bruno has asked me to play that night. And I said, yes. I didn't have a band yet, but I said yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I tell Jeff, like, hey, are you busy tonight? Do you want a gig? And he was like, yeah, sure. Josh Wright was busy. He couldn't do it. And I'm walking through the hallways of
looking for somebody
of Capilano, and my good friend Miles Wong.
Yeah, there you go.
Is not busy that night, or maybe he had to cancel something. I know he had to go, or maybe he just had to go pick up his gear from home first or something like that. But he said yes, and we met and we played from 9 until midnight.
There you go.
And usually that would be 2.5
long
sets.
Oh yeah.
Kind
of like how the tangent used to be.
Yeah. You know how like 3 hours is an awkward amount of time.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not 4 hours like Pat's.
Right. Yeah.
That's 3 sets. That's got to be 3 big sets. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that, I mean, it was great. And I don't really remember that first time, but I do certainly remember being nervous about playing guitar trio because I didn't have experience playing in a trio setting really. A lot of the casual gigs that I had up until then, there was a piano player
or a horn player in front of you.
Exactly. It was just it was a thing that I felt like I wasn't ready for. And I put a lot of weight onto the idea of guitar trio where it was just like, oh, I need to be filling all of this space. I need to be, melodies, which I wasn't necessarily used to doing as much.
Yeah.
A lot of my experience before that was, or just like in Nightcap or in
Where it's all
Combo,
written out for you, or there's a real structure.
Exactly. And so I learned a lot from doing that. And then like starting then all of a sudden, like Bruno was just like getting me to play all the time. I guess he liked.
So obviously you played well.
I guess so. Well enough for the Libra Room.
Yeah.
And, it was managed by this guy named Bake, Beik.
Okay.
Who had like a dB meter above the bar. If the band got the dB meter to spike into the red zone, he would come up to you and tell you to be quiet. Silly, because jazz is dynamic music. There will be crashes of a cymbal that are just loud, and like they create a lot of decibels. But that doesn't mean like the general loudness of the band is going to be overpowering anybody.
It's going to be loud for 1 second, then it's going to be fine for the next 30 minutes.
If that. Exactly. And most people have, in my experience, most people have no issue being able to have a conversation while jazz is playing in the background. I mean, the Libra Room was like a super, super busy bar because it was cheap and it was there forever, right?
Yeah.
So it was just like an old watering hole in like the actual like residential part of Commercial Drive too. So like lots of like local people. And I didn't even mind that, but I also like learned to kind of like get used to a rowdy crowd in a way, and also like dealing with management that like maybe was iffy about, getting the band paid and that kind of thing. And like, not being afraid to assert myself to the person who is technically employing me.
Right.
So I think that was also a really important set of skills. But I mean, I will never take for granted the experience that I got from playing at the Libra Room, because I kind of figured out what to do and who I am and what I'm comfortable with and on all that kind of stuff because of it, right? It was, like I said, it was just like a perfect training for anybody. But a lot of the time it ended up being, guitar trios that were like cutting their teeth there, right? Like I would play there, and then the next day Tom Werrett would play there with maybe the exact same rhythm section.
Oh yeah.
And David would do it, and Tristan Paxton and Mike Agronovich. A lot of us were all just kind of like getting our bearings at the Libra Room.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. And I miss it for that reason, because I feel like, everybody who played there got better as a musician because they did it, I think.
Yeah.
Because also one of the advantages of having a rowdy room and a gig that doesn't pay very much anyway is that you can do whatever you want.
You don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, and you could treat it like an open rehearsal. You can like stop playing halfway through the tune and be like, let's try that again, and like no one will know the difference, even though like that hardly would ever happen anyway. It was just good to have that kind of security included, where it was just like not a high pressure gig. You can kind of get away with anything, but there still is kind of, you want to put on a good show, and you want to play your best, and you want to have a good time.
And you want to learn how it's done,
Yeah.
too, in this kind of learning grounds.
Yeah. And I really appreciated just kind of the concept of getting in there and really, really, really doing it in the real world, because I had a very, sequestered jazz upbringing within CAP, where most of my experience playing standards and everything was a result of being a CAP or inside the building, literally, like really getting out into the real world. I did a lot of learning out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like Second Floor is a really good example.
Be doing that today, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bonnie seems to be really open to hiring people who are trying to get experience, right? Like you could also say the same thing about Tim doing the late night thing.
We're recording on Monday, July 18th, so there's a Lido gig tonight at the Lido.
Right, the Lido,
yeah.
He's doing lots of like younger musicians, like putting together like bigger groups at the Lido. Like that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's the same as the Libra Room, because it's really being like, for the most part, it's like actually being promoted.
There's a stage there. You're up on a stage.
Yeah.
And people are listening. Yeah.
People are coming. People are probably paying for tickets and that kind of thing. So there's a lot more kind of like pomp and circumstance compared to the Libra Room, where it was literally just like every other week I get like a Facebook memory of like
oh yeah.
of just myself being like, surprise, playing tonight at the Lever Room with Bobby Weens
Hey, there
and
you go.
Nico Whitworth or something like.
Nice.
You know, two people who would probably never played together before
yeah.
then, and will probably never play
again,
together ever again.
But they did there. Oh,
Yeah,
that's funny.
yeah.
Did I ever play with you there? I feel like I might have once. I have this memory of playing the first track from Soul Station. What's it called? Remember? I have this memory of playing that tune with you.
It's
long ago
possible.
Enough now that I don't recall the details.
It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done, I did like dozens of nights.
Yeah, I think you were calling out the chord changes to me.
and how does that
that's
make you
that's
feel?
what you're talking about. Great. I needed the help, man. I need all the help I can get. But that's what we're talking about, right? Like you're talking about, oh, you could start and stop and you could change it up and it wouldn't be a problem, right? You were doing that for me in this memory I have of playing this tune where I didn't know the tune, but you were talking me through the changes so that I could play it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of I do really like to be I love to be able to kind of like provide that experience for people, for younger players, like it's I mean, like I kind of got that same kind of thing going to the jam.
The Pat's Jam?
The Pat's Jam,
or even the Goldie's Jam.
Yeah. Did you ever go to the Goldie's Jam?
Yeah. Just barely. I caught the tail end of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I did the Goldie's Jam every week. Me and John Nicholson, we lived together at the Pender House. We were each other's support system for going to the jam session at Goldie's. And I mean, like, for me, this was before I was friends with David. Mm-hmm. And he was just like a really good young guitar player in town that I admired. And so I was just like, wait, so David Blake is playing for free every Monday night?
Yeah. And this was at like a pizza place that was on Pender and Seymour, and it was downstairs.
Yeah. And that room felt like a jazz club.
It did.
It was underground.
It was like New York.
They had a grand piano. They had a stage.
Yeah.
It's man.
I remember going there and I couldn't drink because I was 18.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get some pizza.
Yeah.
And like, it's amazing, that band. Like when you think about it, it was every week. It was David Blake,
the house band.
Yeah. Who lives in New York now. Winston Minkler, who is like easily the most working jazz bassist in town now. Andrew Miller, who lives in New York now, and Brent Maw.
Yeah.
One of the best saxophone players in the country, if you ask me. And they were playing for free every week.
Yeah.
So like just for that reason, I was happy to go to the jam, just to like see them play, see what kind of tunes they were calling, how they, kind of observing that. Because this was earlier, right? Like before I was doing a lot of my own gigs. This was, probably like 2011, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sort of like observing. I remember just like, Brent calling Just Friends and being like, oh, I need to know Just Friends if I want to play with Brent Maw. And so I learned Just Friends, right, that week. And like, I felt so much more motivation to learn a standard in that context than I did for combo, for example, right? Like, but I mean, that's how I got to know David and became really good friends with him since then. That's also, I remember like eventually David asked me to host the jam at Goldie's one time. I remember Ben Frost came with me.
Okay.
And I maybe I like told him to come, but I actually have like basically no memory of that because maybe I just like had no idea what I was doing. But I do remember that I did host it one time. That was the fact that I did it was a big deal. But like, eventually it's just like, at a point it was just like, okay, well, this is just what I do now. I just go to the jam, learn tunes, and I play with people as much as I can. And that just became my routine.
That's how you participated.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're not, doing your own gigs, having a jam session in a city at all that's regular is amazing.
And we do.
Yeah.
To this day. Because we have continuously ever since then. Yeah, for sure. Because the Pat's Jam took over right from that one when it started in 2014. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, and Phil Boniface was running it.
Yep.
And, I became friends with Phil Boniface that way. And he put me up with like some really, really great musicians to where I was kind of like almost in over my head. Like you mentioned having someone yell the changes out to you. Some unknown person. And that happened to me at the Pat's Jam.
Okay.
When Phil put me up on stage with Paul Rushka, Dave Robbins,
whoa,
Brad Turner on trumpet.
Whoa.
Who else was up there? John Gross. and Bob Murphy on
Oh,
piano.
wow. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of
Yeah,
amazing
big-
people.
Big band. Didn't
Yeah.
need me on stage.
No, what
but,
are you going to do?
But Phil was like, no, man, come on, go up there. Yeah.
Yes.
My impression of Phil, I love Phil.
Great guy.
My impression of Phil is always that like everything that he's telling you is a secret.
Oh, kind of like a half whisper.
Yeah, just like man, he's like it doesn't have to be.
Could be anything.
Yeah, it could be anything. I don't know. It's been a while since I've done my Phil Boniface impression. If he's listening, I love you, Phil. I miss you.
Yeah, Phil Boniface, Christian Brothen, and Sharon. Even at that point, right?
Yes,
That was the
that's
trio
right.
that hosted the jam.
Yeah, Christian.
Yeah.
I played Christian last week.
Oh, nice.
But no, and he put me up, and John Gross is on stage, so obviously he calls Voyage, and I didn't know Voyage, but they counted it off, and I was playing Voyage whether I knew it or not, and yeah, Paul was just like screaming out the changes, especially to the bridge. I remember the changes to the bridge. It was like,
there's a lot there.
And like he had to scream them over Dave Robbins,
Right. Loud drumming.
but there aren't that many changes. It's not a long tune, so like I was able to figure it out. But I'm thinking really hard about it, and I let Bob comp for John. I felt like I had the changes down, so I started comping for Brad on Brad's solo, and then John Gross comes up to me and just starts whispering just the wrong changes into my ear, just as a joke.
Oh no!
Because I don't know if you know John, but like his whole thing is that he's like he basically will just bust your chops anytime that he gets the opportunity to, especially if you're a young player. So you either and I guess he's just trying to see if you can roll with the punches, right? So he was just like trying to get me to make a mistake, I guess. But I mostly thought it was funny because that's probably the funniest thing you can do to somebody in that situation is just try to whisper the wrong changes to them, because that's coming up with the wrong changes is already like
that
impressive.
requires thinking.
Yeah, it's impressive to do. Like, so I saw the humor in it. Although I couldn't appreciate it at the moment, but I do very much now. I cherish that memory. I suppose Phil saw that I had a lot of dedication, and he wanted to kind of put me in that situation where I kind of felt like I had earned that. That's all I can say about like going to the jam. At least it's like the house band always appreciates people who are there for the right reasons. Not that you can really be there for the wrong reasons, but like like. If you're there to learn and you're there to be a part of a community gathering, then the house band understands that, and they'll treat you well. In my experience, at least, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. All this stuff about real world experience,
Yeah.
right? Can I ask you a harder question about that? I guess.
Okay, let's try.
Yeah, exactly. Let's try, because I'll jump in on this too. So,
Yeah.
Imagine there's somebody today who is in that age like where you were when you were first getting exposed to the Libra Room, when you're starting to have all these great real world experiences that you're telling stories from around that age, but hasn't had them yet. And so instead what they have is what you described as the sequestered feeling, where you're playing for the classroom.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a level of satisfaction and joy and stuff and learning that you don't get if you only have that, right? At some point you got to go out and find.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're getting at here, right?
Yeah.
With these kind of stories, right? So what should that person do today?
Well, like I said, like what I had to do was reach out, right? Like I had kind of like learned about reaching out that year, because earlier that year I reached out to Peter Bernstein to get a lesson with him while he was in town. He was playing at the Cellar, and I was like, I want to get a lesson with this guy. I sent him an email. I don't hear anything back. This was like 2 months before he comes to town. I sent him an email and I didn't hear anything back. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess he's not doing anything. Peter Saravalli.
Yes.
You know Peter Saravalli?
I played with him, yeah.
He comes up to me like a week before Bernstein's in town. He's like, hey, man, I'm getting a lesson with Bernstein. And I'm like,
oh,
what did you do? Like, how did you get in contact
That's
with him?
funny.
He's like, did you email him? Like, yeah. He's like, dude, you got to message him on Facebook. And I'm like,
oh,
that's so unexpected, but okay. And sure enough, I sent him a message on Facebook, and he gets back to me like later that day, and he's like, yeah, you can meet me in my hotel. We'll do a lesson. that was crazy. That was like one of the first like things of like me initiating like real world contact and like getting a response,
Getting a result.
right?
And was this not the beginning of you eventually got a grant to go study with him?
Yeah.
This was before that. This was the
Yes.
beginning of your journey with Peter Bernstein,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
how you
So
started it.
So I built that rapport with him, and you know we had a great time. You know, it was supposed to be an hour, and we ended up playing for an hour and a half. And he was like, I gotta go have lunch with Weeds. And so like we ended our lesson, and he was just like, yeah, sounds great, man. Like hit me up again. And eventually, you know, I ended up writing this grant proposal to go study with him. He was cool with it. And like, you know, I would never have like had instinct to reach out if I had never gotten that kind of like first response, right? So like after that, I had kind of this instinct to reach out to whomever, right? So
because you did it and you saw that it actually works, or that
and it
can work.
materialized, right?
Yeah.
Like you just have to show initiative and show that you have something to offer, I suppose. So same thing with Bruno. It was just like, oh well, I'm just gonna send him a message, and that worked out. And then eventually, you know, I applied for this grant where I was able to study with Bernstein, and I actually got this advice from Christian Brathen, who had also successfully gotten a study grant. And he said, you know, figure out who the program officer is for your grant program, reach out to them directly and introduce yourself and be like, hey, I'm a person who exists in the real world, and they will probably help you out.
Right.
There's people out there who are waiting to be reached out to. Chances are you are the type of person that they want to reach out to them. And if you're not, then they'll let you know. But like,
if you're not yet, then they'll let
Right,
you know.
yeah.
They might even tell you what you need to work on.
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's what it is like, I think you have to do some research, right? You have to figure out like what your lane is, for example, right? Like, you know, I don't think I could have reached out to Corey and asked for a gig at the Cellar when I was 22 with no experience.
Yeah.
But I was able to reach out to Bruno and ask for a gig at the Libre Room because according to my research, that was the most likely place to give me a gig. And I was right. And, you know, I had learned these things from talking to David, who had already been playing at the Libre Room a whole bunch. And he was like, oh, why aren't you already playing at the Libre Room? You should play. Contact Bruno. This is his, you know, information. There's a reason why I refer to the Jam as a community gathering. There are other things that are, you know, that function the same way, but the Jam is free and it happens at the same time every week, with generally the same people running it. It's a perfect example of a community gathering, meaning you can engage with the community that you are part of, or you can join the community. You can get resources available through the community. So resources could just be information, right? If you ask Sharon, where's a good place to play piano? Like who should I contact for a gig or something like that? You know, you'd probably be able to tell you, or anybody else. Or you can meet somebody there. I know this happens all the time. You can meet somebody at the Jam who is in a similar place to you, career-wise, who you can collaborate with, and you can build a group, and you can have a project, and you can present that project to somebody. I would say just making yourself a part of the community in some way, however you can, I think is one of the most crucial parts, because that's what you're trying to do is to participate in a community, be able to prove that you are willing to contribute to the community in some way, right? And there are many ways to do that. You know, make connections, make new friends, hopefully, you know, all those kinds of things. And, you know, let these things grow organically through those connections, but also be proactive, reach out to people, ask who you can reach out to. Don't sit on your hands, I guess.
How do you ask who you can reach out to? Is this like one of your peers? This is kind of like what you're talking about when you had a conversation with David, and then he said,
Yeah.
why aren't you playing here? So who do you reach? You
You could reach out. You can reach out to
to.
David, right? I just mean, at this point, I think, you know, I'm becoming, you know, one of the, you know, older young people in the scene, or, you know,
You're established. You
I-
are.
Yeah. I'm more established than I was 5 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you could ask me, you could ask, just people who have
And people do ask me.
what-
People
like,
do ask me for
who
sure.
who ask
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
or like what you were saying, like at the beginning of the episode, like asking somebody who's 2 steps ahead of you, right?
Yeah.
Like getting advice from that person because they'll be able to provide like a kind of like a more practical version of advice, right? Like I'm giving kind of more generic advice where it's just like be a part of the community, ask somebody who probably knows the answer to a question. When you join the community, you can identify that person, build some sort of relationship with them, right? Like there are people who I guess you could call gatekeepers,
Which doesn't have to be bad.
yeah.
You know, they serve a purpose,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. But like the same thing I hear from all the people who are booking music, they want to hear from people and they want to book people who are active in the community,
Who are participating in a
Yeah.
way that they can, it is legible to them, that they can see.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is more than fair, right? That's generous, really. They don't have to go that far. They could be like, no, I need numbers. I need to know that you are, you're able to bring this kind of crowd, that kind of thing. That's kind of like I've heard that kind of thing before. And just asking for you to be a member of the community is, I don't think a big ask. Like generally what I would tell people is try to be there, make connections. Don't just, show up and leave without talking to somebody. Like you can usually spark a conversation with somebody at Pat's. Like Sharon Minamoto is the nicest, most generous person in the universe. So like you can talk to her and she will give you the time of day. And she makes herself very busy at the jam, but she will still talk to you, and she's a really good person to talk to because she knows what's going on. She's relevant. But yeah, there's like Bonnie at second floor, Corey even, right? Like although Corey has a podcast now where he just tells you what to do,
right? He tells me what to do.
Yeah, he tells you what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I ask him.
Yeah.
And he tells me what to do.
He's interested in doing that because I mean Corey Weeds, he's the guy.
That's so funny because he literally said on episode 1 of Jazz Office Hours, the first one that we put out this month, he said like a couple of years ago, he literally said people started saying I'm the guy.
He's the guy.
And like
It's true.
he never sat down to think about that because he's just going. So in his mind, he's still like a young guy coming up, and like
Totally.
he honestly just thinks that every day. And so he didn't really sit down and think about what it meant that other people were thinking he was the guy now until
Yeah.
like very, very recently.
I mean, I think I think everybody kind of experiences that, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is a little bit divorced from their public perception, right? Especially if you're a person who just has their head down. Of course you would feel that way. But I mean, The Cellar was, I mean, that's there isn't anywhere else where you'd be able to see Christian McBride play in October
for like 2 or 3 nights. Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw
right?
him. I
Like-
remember that one.
with Christian Sands and
on drums, Ulysses Owens.
Ulysses,
Yeah.
Ulysses.
Yeah. And then, and all the way up to like George Coleman and Harold Mayburn, of course,
Yeah.
too, right? People like that. Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. But he went to, this is material for a future episode of Jazz Office Hours probably too, but like he went to New York with the attitude that we were talking about earlier. Like he went to New York to reach out.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
to try and introduce himself to people who were established there.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like it keeps evolving, like it's always going to feel like you're appealing to a larger.
It should, because that means you're learning and you're like striving to. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. But I mean, so don't be afraid of that feeling, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it's always going to feel like that. And like it's a skill to like be able to do that and feel okay about it and not feel weird and small to reach out to a larger entity, reach out.
Thank you for tuning in to this unorthodox but fascinating, in my opinion, episode of the Rhythm Changes podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, you can find more of what I do at rhythmchanges.ca and sign up for the free weekly article that I write. This week, I reviewed an album by Ariane Racicot. It's a progressive, modern jazz piano trio album that rocks pretty hard. Check that out. And if you like it, sign up for future editions of the free weekly article at rhythmchanges.ca.